Good afternoon. Welcome. Just going to switch glasses here so I can see what I'm doing or saying. Hi, my name is Stuart Elliott. On behalf of the 3,400 writers, translators, and editors of PEN, it's our great pleasure to welcome you to the 8th Annual PEN World Voices Festival of International Literature. I'd like to take a moment to thank the festival sponsors and supporters, without whose generosity none of this would have been possible. Also like to thank the Standard and the Public Theater, which are serving as the festival's hubs this year, and also would like to thank the more than 100 volunteers who've given their time to help out. There are still several more festival events for you to attend today. You can find out the complete schedule of events at www.worldvoicesfestival.org. Videos and photos of events will be posted online as soon as tomorrow. And don't forget to add your name to the sign-up sheet at the membership table to receive an e-newsletter and stay current on all PEN news. The 2013 World Voices Festival has brought together writers from around the globe to explore bravery in art, politics, and personal life. Over the course of the week, we've examined writers' impact on political transformation in recent global hotspots such as Burma, Palestine, South Africa, Haiti, and Guantanamo Bay, as well as honor those small acts of bravery that are displayed in everyday life. Books will be available for sale at the table outside as you leave, where the authors will be available to sign copies after. Before I introduce each of our guests, each of our panelists, I'd like to remind you to please turn off everything that you have in your possession, which has batteries or other means of electrical generation. Please, that includes anything that beeps, rings, buzzes, plays music, squeals, dances, or does the hokey pokey. Do you have this and even if you have turned them off, there's always one out there, so please check again. Thank you. And now I'm going to introduce our panelists before we get started. And I just wanted to remind everybody that we're hoping to have about 20 minutes of Q&A before we wind up this afternoon. So while we're yakking away up here, please think about some of the questions that you would like to ask of our panelists. So I would like to introduce at the far end Archie Gottesman. She's the Chief Branding Officer of Edison Properties, and in this capacity oversees advertising for Edison Park Fest and Manhattan Mini Storage. The Manhattan Mini Storage advertising campaign is the core of what we're going to be discussing today. Next to her is John Kenny. He's a longtime advertising copywriter and executive who's the author of a well-received recent novel called Truth in Advertising, about the ad business. He's also a contributor to The New Yorker and to The New York Times. And next to John and next to me is Karen Wong of the New Museum, who's the founder of the Festival Ideas for the New City, which ran from Wednesday through yesterday. And she was telling us earlier about an incredible event that they had yesterday with, 50,000 people?
Out on the streets.
Out on the streets of the Bowery, partaking of ideas for the new city. So thank you for doing the tough turnaround and coming from the wrap-up of your event to doing this panel today. So again, thank you all for attending, and we're going to start off now. The discussion that we're going to have.
We forgot it.
All right. Oh, there we go. All right, how's that? Is that any better? Okay, much better. Okay. And for my next number, I'd like to sing the song Stylings of John Denver. The discussion that we're going to have up here, as I said a moment ago, the core of it is a advertising campaign that's been run for several years now by a company called Manhattan Mini Storage. And Archie is going to talk to us about that and what they do. And then after we discuss the campaign and some of the ups and downs and different aspects of how it's been received over the years, we're going to throw it open to a larger discussion up here about the role of advertising in the public arena, the limits of commercial free speech, and if there are any, and whether there should be or should not be such limits, and what the rules are in New York versus other big cities, or the the rules in New York versus rural Ohio, and some of the issues that arise from this intersection of advertising, public opinion, taste, sensibility, and trying to get a rise out of a very hard-to-reach audience in the city of New York. So, Archie, I thought we'd just start by asking you to talk a little bit about the campaign and how it came about, and where the idea came from to address have your ads address issues of contemporary relevance at the same time that you're trying to interest customers in taking out little rooms to store their tchotchkes.
Okay. First of all, thanks for having me here today. There are good things and bad things about being a member of a family business. And Edison Properties is a family business. It was started 57 years ago by my dad and my uncle. So I won't go into the bad things today because whatever, I could talk afterwards. But about 10 years, I've been there for about 25 years now. And after sort of learning the business for the first few years, I got into the advertising and the marketing. And back in the 80s, we were still trying to tell people what self-storage is because it wasn't that popular. It was relatively new business. So the fact that you had your own lock and your own key, and it was you put your stuff in and no one bothered you, like that was actually something to educate people about. But that's just not that hard. Like, we have parking and we stay open till 10 and sometimes 24 hours. But after a while, it gets a little boring. So at some point, the job of teaching people to store with Manhattan Mini Storage and put their stuff with us, I don't know if it was just selfish on my part, but it just was like, oh my God, like let's do something a little more interesting. And we started, it was kind of organic. There wasn't this big plan to just talk about my feelings and get good stuff out there. It was just like, we started with things that were a little bit funny. We had an ad about Imelda and her shoes. If you have as many shoes as Imelda, that was way back when. And then it became more fun. It became that, well, if we can do that, then if one campaign that we would do was funny or a little provocative, we would add and do, we would do the next campaign also sort of interesting. And then the whole idea of going back and just talking about storage and and what your storage room was going to be like was sort of, it was absurd. Like, it was way too much doing what we were doing, so we've just kept going in that direction. And, we always do try, that can go on and on, but basically we do try often to link storage to a campaign. We really, really do. Sometimes we're like, oh my God, we got to talk about storage at some point. And so as you'll see, the ads are running behind us. We really try. And then there are times we're like, you know what, there's just such a great topic we want to talk about. Even if we can't link it with storage, we will just go and do it. But trying to keep... But just one more thing is we happen to have a very, very good business. Like, we run a good business, and we have... so a lot about, like, just making people aware that if they're thinking storage, like, oh, I want to put my stuff somewhere, I'm going to move, or moving in with, my boyfriend, and I got to do stuff. As long as they call us or go to our website, like, we can kind of handle them from there. So we don't have to do it all on a billboard or on a subway ad, because we just want to, like, if they know about us, the rest can, if they get to us, we'll take it from there.
Now, one of the very interesting things about what you do is that it's all done internally, in-house at your company. You do sometimes use freelance advertising, professional types, but most of it, for the most part, you do on your own. And
Yeah.
I'm interested if you could talk a little bit about how that process works, and then some of the feedback that you get in terms of what issues or what topics you find people will give you permission to talk about and that they like to see in your ads, and which subjects that they, flip side of that being, you get pushback or bounce back in a negative way from people that you've had to change an ad or withdraw an ad, or there's some ads that you create and then decide that they're not going to fly?
Okay. So the way that we do it is, and this is very interesting. So Stacy Stewart, who's right there, Stacy just waved, because if it wasn't, Stacy and I work together intimately, and we have worked together now for almost 18 years, and we know each other, and we know what is like that razor sharp edge of the ad that we'll put out there. If it doesn't have it, like if it doesn't sort of feel sharp, we both know it, but we've been doing this for a while. But it used to be that, because you asked sort of how we got to it, before we got the confidence to be as sort of push the envelope, we used to have a committee. It was awful. Like, oh my God. We would go and Stacey, we'd make copies of these of the ads that we thought about. So maybe we make a copy of 10 ads. And then the general manager and all these people in operations, everyone would get to look at them, and they would sort of start to say, oh, I like this one, I don't like that, or I don't like that one. And we're like, what the hell? Why are we asking the guy who's in charge of telemarketing? Nothing against telemarketing, but why would I want to know if he thought that the ad was good or not, right? Because all that was happening is we were vanilla-izing. I mean, we were just making some really good ads boring because we started to listen to everybody. And I'll never forget this. I actually, Meg, can you show the one with Sarah Palin? Oh, no, Cheney. This is really I think this is really an interesting thing about how other people can kill an idea. There was an ad that is basically something like your closet is getting as narrow as Cheney's. We'll get it. Anyway, just trust me. It says, well, you'll see it in a second.
There it is, yeah. Your closet's scarier than Bush's agenda?
No, it's the one that looks like, that's it. That's it, you got it. That's it. Okay, but this is really interesting. Okay, so see Cheney?
There we go.
Okay, originally that was Condoleezza Rice, and it was a black woman wearing, I don't know, whatever Condoleezza was wearing. So I showed it to someone, and they're like, oh my God, you can't have a woman, and you can't have a black woman, and that's terrible. And I was like, oh, okay. So we pulled it. We pulled the Condoleezza. It never got up on a billboard. And then I was thinking later, I was like, well, what the hell? If you start listening to everyone who tells you that that's not a good idea, I don't think it would have been so terrible. Condoleezza Rice happened to have a very similar view at that point, I mean, that was a while ago, to Dick Cheney. So every time we've sort of, Stacey and I have learned a lesson like that, I'm like, you know what, we don't need to listen to everyone who doesn't like our stuff. We just sort of have to listen to our internal stuff. There was another one with a Buddha, which says, this is really interesting because I'm Jewish and my whole family's Jewish, and I'm not anti-Semitic at all because I'm way into my Judaism. And we had see that one? Okay, so that was an ad. This was a campaign about your stuff that's in storage is talking. And what happened was the ADL, what is that? The Anti-Defamation League,
yeah,
which is a Jewish group, called and they're like, you can't have that, and that's anti-Semitic. And we're and that was way early. And I happened to be away, and Stacey's like, oh my God. And we did take it down because that's the only one that we ever took down because someone was so mad at us because they thought that was anti-Semitic. And then I don't think we've ever pulled one again because we shouldn't, and today we would never pull it. Today we'd be like, you know what? We don't actually think that it's anti-Semitic, and we think that it's just a comment on Jews becoming Buddhists, and then they become Jewish again, and maybe some people didn't get it.
It sounds like you have a lot more leeway because you're in New York, but at the same time, there are several of our own peculiar worldviews here in New York that are restricting you maybe in a way that wouldn't be the case if you were someplace else.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I don't think people would get us in other places. I don't know if they would understand the Buddha idea at all, but maybe, so yeah, being in New York is it's like a playground for interesting people who are going to get interesting ads, and they kind of get it, and they have a very, very sharp sense of humor, so we like to talk to New Yorkers. Like there's one about chopping onions. You don't want to chop onions on your air conditioner. So obviously that means like your apartment is so small that you have nowhere to put anything.
You're using it as a cutting board.
Exactly. So your air conditioner is a cutting board. And like only New Yorkers would get that because we're talking to us and they're.
So you do have some freedom there in the sense that you're talking to a very broad-minded, hopefully educated, hopefully with it kind of a potential customer base who would be open to this kind of an approach.
Exactly. And then if they, and some of them aren't because once in a while, I mean, and when we talk, I would say that New Yorkers, because you said before about if people don't like us or when they get mad, I'd say the most hate mail comes when we go political. It doesn't go when we go, about gay marriage or anything like that. It's this very sort of vitriolic anger about us being like shills for Obama, and you're just like, wait till you liberals, like you're not gonna.
And is any of this coming from New York, or is it from out of town?
A lot is coming from out of town, but there are some coming from New York. This is kind of funny. There was this one letter from this woman who's basically like, Republicans are the ones with all the money anyway, so if you liberals win, you're just ruining New York. And like, we don't get back to you. I mean, we basically depends on who it is. So sorry, but I was like, like I like to shop with the best of them. Like she was acting like you liberals are just ruining it, and it's all about the Republicans and the money. And I mean, like really angry people. But anyway, so yes, there are plenty of angry.
What kind of form does hate mail come in? I'm just
email. They email, they tweet email. Sometimes.
Oh, okay.
They used to write letters.
Yeah.
Mail.
I still get written letters sometimes that usually are hate mail. Email is usually praise, and hate mail is usually snail mail. I'm not sure why. There was another thing that you mentioned earlier about the when you bring up the issue of I don't know how to say it, body mass or body appearance or obesity,
Being
and
fat.
that's like a third rail when it comes to your
Okay, so that's
response
actually
to, or
this is very interesting because I personally don't think it's a third rail, but so this is just interesting, like call and how much fun it is because we just get to do this. It's very sort of granular. A woman called Stacy. There was an ad. Can you put up the fat ladies? There they are. Okay, so and I don't mean to be like, but so what happened was I think of so many of our ads that is like on the relatively medium side, so not benign, but it's not. I didn't think it was so huge, and I don't think that we thought it was when we first put it up. But what happened is someone called and they got Stacy on the phone, and she really said things like, you're making fun of fat people, and it's not fair, and it's not something that people can control. And she apparently was so hurt and upset by it that like Stacy has basically outruled fat since then, and that was years ago. And so sometimes like something will come up and talking about like. And you're like, no, because
that's completely off
limits. Oh my God,
this
this woman left a huge like impression on Stacey. She's like, all right, so we will probably not be doing.
Why not?
Ads
I'm not sure if it's a sensitive issue, particularly in New York or in general. But I had a friend who had a job offer rescinded because he liked to go on Facebook and make post what he thought were humorous comments about obesity and I didn't quite understand them, but I mean it did get everyone's attention when they pulled this job offer because they were trolling his social media content and found all these posts, and I think he was sort of, I don't know, as fat as in some cases I think people feel that they can attack fat people because it's not politically correct to attack anyone else anymore. But whatever it was, he lost that job. They said, you can't come work for us now. And believe me, he's not posting about fat people any longer. So that does seem to be a very sensitive issue. And again, I'm not sure if it's here in New York because of the fashion industry and the advertising industry being based here, or because of the, or whether that's just a larger societal issue. And there was another one that you had up there about the soldier, the toy soldier, which was supposed to be an anti-war commentary.
Right.
And then you got some complaints about that because the soldier was speaking with bad grammar, and people were
Yeah.
interpreting that as anti-military
I
or
know.
something. And
People are like, sometimes it is amazing what people make comments on and like why that would bother
I assume
someone.
that was a child speaking. or
Yeah,
something.
I mean, it's a guy, like, it's my owner's ma, like, I don't know, it was surprising to receive that kind. Sometimes it's shocking what people, what they respond about. One that we didn't put up, though, and we didn't even, oh, no, we did mock it up, the 67. Okay, so this was real personal, and
was that Obama? Was that the
No, you
Obama
wouldn't even see it.
1967?
No, if you
Oh.
want. Okay, so here is the thing. I was really annoyed because I bet you guys don't even get it. That has to do with Israel's borders, and it's too obscure, right? I bet you think that.
I didn't get that either.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it didn't go up because what happened was this was when Obama was talking about having Israel go back to its 1967 borders. I'm not right wing when it comes to Israel, but I'm like more. So I was like furious about that. So we were going to do that one, but we talked about, basically we kind of showed it to a few people, and if not enough people get it, or it might really make people angry. We had someone that were like a little stronger. We just didn't, because you have to have some people.
No, on that note, you
Some
did
people
you
have
did
to-
have an ad about Grey Gardens that sort of referenced
and some
Grey
people don't
Gardens,
get
and
the Grey
again, that's the
Gardens.
kind of thing that it would take. I mean, there are some people in New York who will get that instantly, and there are other people who will scratch their heads, and there will be people who will look it up and Google it, and they say, "Oh, I get it now. That's funny."
It's really funny.
So that's something like that
right.
you felt was fair game to include in an ad, and
Right, you're not little Edie.
Yeah.
Isn't Grey Gardens because her house is like so full of stuff. Yeah, I know. I was surprised not that everyone would get that. Sometimes I want to say to people like, you need to be up on pop culture if you're going to look at our billboards because like we're putting stuff up. It is.
there will be a quiz.
There will be a quiz. You've got to watch
Manhattan
it.
Mini Stories, there will be a quiz. That should be
That's
your
a
new
good
slogan.
one.
That should be your next slogan. So now I think I'd like to talk a little bit more about some of the issues that your advertising and the responses to it raises and involve the other panelists. One of obviously the big issues here is commercial speech and free speech, and I believe that the Supreme Court is now looking more favorably on commercial enterprises in many, many ways, thanks to Mr. Roberts. And I don't mean Mr. Roberts like the nice Henry Fonda Mr. Roberts. I mean the other Mr. Roberts. And anyway, the Supreme Court seems to be giving big businesses more leeway in many areas, one of which is that businesses have the kind of rights to free speech that individuals do, which wasn't always the case over the years. That said, that means that giant corporations and small ones, like small companies like yours, Archie, have the ability now to take stands on issues and make comments on things that interest the public or political. And then there's nudity. Sometimes it's just fun to run ads of naked people. Come on. But the whole question of free speech and commercial speech is something that you bring up and push the boundaries on and push the envelope on all the time. So I was wondering if the other panelists would like to talk a little bit about that. John, maybe from the perspective of somebody who writes ads and what you feel your client should be saying or not saying about that, and then maybe Karen from the perspective of being in the public space and what an average person walking down the street should they be bombarded with ads, and if they are, is it okay for the ads to talk about potato salad but not about the war in Afghanistan or gay rights or religion or what have you, and how we sort that out as consumers and as citizens. So take it away, whoever
Sure.
wants to grab that and run with it.
Can you hear me? I think what's interesting about your model is in a time when free speech and the envelope are so broad is how few corporations take advantage of that. Things tend to be a bit milquetoast in corporate America and how people, how companies choose to speak to us. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. I think one's fear. people are afraid in large corporations to take a stand on anything that isn't universally accepted. And we were talking backstage before we came out. I think what that creates is an incredibly low benchmark of mediocrity. There has to be some measure of risk. You're going to offend someone if you have an idea, right? You're going to offend someone. You don't want to be offensive as a large corporation. You want people to like you, but not everyone's going to like you, as I learned when I wrote my first novel. But I think one of the other reasons is committees. And I write stuff on the side, but I like to eat and send my children to school, so I work in advertising and enjoy it. But I'm a freelance writer, so it's kind of interesting. I have my foot both in the agency world and sort of outside, and I write what they tell me to write. If I got to write what I wanted to write for them, I think I would like to push it further. Because I think the world we live in now, Mark Zuckerberg said there are no secrets. Well, corporations, I think, many of them, not all, are in a very huddled secrecy mode still, and are not in the world that a lot of us are living in, which is a lot more open. And you're your own committee.
Right.
Corporations have levels and levels and layers of middle management, people whose job it is to be afraid. And I don't say that pejoratively, I honestly don't, because what they are told to do, what they are hired to do, is say, don't have anyone pay attention to us for the wrong reason. The flip side of that is it's unlikely someone's going to pay attention to you for the right reason. Because the nature of advertising, rule number one is get someone to pay attention to you, right? In your headline, in your television commercial, in your website, you have to get someone to pay attention to you. And the nature of that, I think, is that some are going to like it and some aren't. So you have a perfect advertising creative model that I think most corporations would be deathly afraid of.
And the boundaries keep changing too. I mean, what's acceptable now may not have been acceptable 5 or 10 years ago, and certainly not 10 or 20 years ago. And that sort of sets up a whole set of issues too.
And also, everything is a brand now, right? That's what we're told. We are, as individuals, we are a brand, right? I was coming here today. I was running late, so I jumped in a cab, and I was at the corner of Houston and Lafayette. And on my left was BP, a BP gas station, and directly ahead of me was an unbelievably awesome / pornographic Calvin Klein billboard, and to its left was Hangover Part 3. And I couldn't figure out which was the worst one, the most heinous. I think it might have been BP, I'm not sure. But every one of those is a brand who's speaking a voice, right? Hangover 3 has pushed boundaries of what's sort of acceptable and gross, but it's funny, right? If you can make someone laugh, man, that's great. In advertising and movies and whatever you do. Calvin Klein, the image, when I was growing up, that image would have been as far as you go in Playboy magazine. A woman, you could sort of see the side of her breast, but that was, wow, that was sexy. Now we don't pay attention to it. And BP, for many years, did a spectacular job of convincing us that they weren't an oil company. We're beyond petroleum.
But John, I want to kind of go back to this idea of being a small private company where there's a lot of everything can be done in-house, approved in-house, you're the boss, and then you're saying also corporations, all this different layering, and tie that back into also the real economic model of advertising is who has the most money for paid media, so who has the most money to get their message out in public space. So what happens when you talk about this idea of issue-based advertising? Should have maybe Coca-Cola in New York been against gay marriage, and they decided to do some campaign, versus somebody liberal and cool like mini Manhattan storage, but only had this amount of ad space. I guess that I don't know. There's kind of a danger with regards to those who have the most money will get this message out,
Right.
particularly about politics. And so for
Yeah, and
me,
that's what-
as a public citizen, I'm a little scared about that.
Right, because we found out in the again with the Supreme Court with their ruling on spending by corporations on election campaigns, they can now do that, and that money flooded into the system last year to an unbelievable degree, and raised all kinds of questions and all sorts of fears among people about the idea that the golden rule: he who has the gold rules, and is that quote unquote right in a society like ours where we talk about everybody being equal and everyone having a voice? What if you have the ability to hold a megaphone that's 500 times the size of your neighbor's megaphone?
Right. Well, in the whole free speech conversation, take the Newtown shooting. A large corporation could have come out and said we need better gun control laws. A GE could have done it, or an Apple could have done it, but they didn't. That's a choice.
You wanted to do it, yeah.
Well, yeah. So there were in the gun control. It is interesting how the only people, it is a perfect freedom kind of for us, except for when we advertise on subways, because and any paid advertising. So buses, we don't have that big of a budget. So billboards, we own our billboards, which is why we can control what we put up there. But 2 lines. Adam Sack, who does a lot of our writing, was here. We were talking literally Wednesday. We had 2 lines that you will never see on the subways because the MTA turned these down, which is insane, because one of them says they're called an assault, because assault was going to be, in quotes, assault weapons for a reason. Like, I would never think that they would have turned that down, and because I think the gun issue is hugely important. And then the other line that got turned down, which I thought might have gotten turned down, which says the founding fathers believed in gun rights. They also owned slaves. Which is really funny. But that one they said no. But it is kind of interesting. Like, they're kind of waiting to just it is very, very difficult unless you're controlling everything. But what is interesting is in the gay marriage, that's definitely hit stride. Because
there have been many corporations that are
Exactly.
taking a stand in favor
big
of gay
ones.
marriage.
Expedia,
Yes.
Microsoft.
Large companies,
Yeah.
not only in policy ways like giving their employees same-sex benefits, but also running ads on Facebook and other social media. When the Supreme Court was hearing the gay marriage arguments that day, they changed their ads on their posts on Facebook, their icon, their avatars to support and endorse gay marriage. And some of these corporations were rather large mainstream companies like Nordstrom, not just the usual suspect bleeding heart liberal type companies.
Exactly.
So people were a lot of people noticed that because it was sort of another step in the direction of companies taking stands on issues that can be divisive. But you can also make an argument from the point of view of a devil's advocate. Do I really want to hear from a giant corporation about issues that ought to be the province of our elected officials and the public? I mean, General Electric may not be running ads on the issue of gun control, but there was a story last week that said that the GE finance arm is no longer giving loans or some sort of mortgages or something to gun stores, to gun shops. If somebody wants to open a gun store now and buy an inventory of guns, apparently GE is not going to give you that money. And also, I think I understand that Comcast, on their local cable systems where they run advertising, if you're Joe's Gun Shop in Walla Walla, Washington, and you want to run a commercial about a 2-for-1 sale on assault weapons for Mother's Day or whatever, Comcast has decided that they're not going to accept any longer commercials for gun stores. So, you can make a case where maybe these companies shouldn't make, I don't want to hear from a company about this, or if a company does have a stand on an issue, they should do something substantive in the realm of what directly affects their business, as opposed to running an ad that maybe might make you feel good, but then you find out they really have not done anything in the way of lobbying legislators or making political contributions or changing their own corporate policies. So I just like to throw that out to the panelists about, what your thoughts are about that. We were talking earlier also about the Dove soap advertising, which for several years now has this theme called Campaign for Real Beauty, where they're trying to re-present themselves as being on the side of women of all types and sizes and shapes and looks, and some of their advertising has been very applauded for being no longer embracing stereotypes about beauty, women and beauty, but there is some pushback on that too, that the ads aren't genuine, or there's still too many beautiful blonde women in the ads, and some other issues. So whoever wants to grab that.
Yeah, I don't mean to suggest necessarily that companies should embrace every social issue in their advertising, though I think two things are interesting. One is the increasing freedom they have and power to speak because of the money. But I think that the second thing too is companies today ask us to embrace them as a brand, that they are part of our entire life, right? That they want to be, they want to surround us, whether it's a bank or a clothing company or a food company. They want to be a part of our life. And I just find that interesting, because if you're going to be a part of my life and not just a Triscuit, right? Well, then how do you fit into my life? Apple fits into my life because it's, without that machine, that's my day, right? It just is. It's become part of who I am and my identity. It just has, like a lot of us. So if a company is going to suggest to me that you are a part of my life, well, I choose my friends based on sort of their beliefs and things like that. I'm saying, is there an opportunity for corporations to push the boundary a little bit on what it is they say and how they want to be a part of my life?
So much of it, at the end of the day, has to do with execution. Because let's go back to 20-some years ago, when United Colors of Benetton produced probably some of the most memorable, just provocative ads, where you had a black man and a blonde woman having an Asian baby, and so I guess. And I think the reason why the mini Manhattan storage ads work so well is that this is like affordable space, so the ads look cheap. Not to say that it all kind of goes together, and
They look handcrafted.
Bohemian.
Right.
They're
bohemian.
And it always looks
artisanal.
Like,
It's artisanal
and you
advertising.
always refer back to something about the concept of
Yes.
space. The thing that about Dove is those execution of those ads. They're just a little corny, I think. So that one, I don't buy as much. Kenneth Cole, I do buy. What you stand for, and they've also been doing social issue ads for 30-some years. I think they've been also excellent with regards to execution. So
And I do think that I just think at the basics, it's just more interesting. Because they do, our products are all around us, and whether I'm buying, a shirt at the Gap or Nordstrom's, they're just people behind it. So I just think, even if it's just, God, not so much, I'm always amazed at how much boring advertising there is out there, because of the fear that I think you were talking about before. And it's like, I don't know, it is just so difficult to catch people's attention. It's interesting, the only time that we have to advertise anything but storage is when we advertise parking. And there's one ad that keeps flashing up about the, what it says? It says that God's too busy. That one, it says, stop praying, God's too busy to find you a parking spot. So it was interesting. And and the other one, New York City traffic isn't a nightmare, nightmares are shorter, and it was interesting because no matter what I was going to advertise for, because even thinking about coming here today and talking, I was like, well, gosh, is it just storage? Or if I was going to start advertising tables, I would do it in a way that was interesting, because parking is not any more interesting than storage, but it's just to me, important to be interesting because otherwise, oh God, I mean, it would just be such hard work. So I wish that all companies would sort of push the envelope further. And I remember those Benetton ads, they were doing it before anybody else was.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah,
it's kind
can
of
we
fun.
talk a little bit more about this concept of pushing the envelope? One of the things interesting to me is the more that over the years companies have pushed the envelope, the more that the boundary keeps moving more and more down the field, and then you get to the point where in order to get attention and to get noticed, companies, advertisers have to do some really out there kinds of things. In some cases that means taking a stand on an issue that you would never expect a company to take, or that a company like that would take. In some cases it means naked people in the ads, or ads that mention religion or sex or obesity or body image and things like that. And I mean, all of us are consumers, and all of us in New York, we walk through the streets and consume advertising, and they're exposed to ads in a unique way that is hardly, is not as much in any other city in the world possibly than here. So I'm just interested in the panelists' perceptions on this whole issue of breaking through and pushing the envelope versus how far is too far, how much is too much, where do you draw the line, and who draws that line? The loudest complainer draws the line. The standards and practices department at the TV network that won't accept a commercial, do they draw the line? Who draws the line? Or should there be a line at all? Should we just have a free-for-all and let the public sort it out?
I mean, I would do the last. I would let the public sort it out because we don't, it's interesting. We don't necessarily say, oh gosh, here's a topic, we're going to do an ad. We are we watch the news. I mean, the news is talking about guns. And Anthony Weiner, I mean, the one about, remember, there was a morning when he tweeted, and now he's coming back, but this was a couple years ago, the one that says, stop tweeting weird shit. Yeah, see the one on the left? Okay, that was just a perfect example of, it was like the morning that story broke. And we were talking, and it was just a good time because we were putting some billboards up. We were like, there's got to be something about Anthony Weiner. Let's put it up. So it was a much more of a reaction to what the news is telling us. I don't necessarily, oh gosh, I mean, same with guns, same with the big soda ad. So there's a lot of this is what's happening in pop culture. This is what we comment on in a very specific way.
So what would be one that you wouldn't like? What, the sequester because it's too dull, or
Yeah.
or
People
what
don't-
would?
people
So how
may
do
not
you?
understand it.
How do is it something like something that really affects people viscerally, and that's what you want to talk about, or
Yeah.
maybe something is very important but it's very boring? Then you're going to take a pass, or
It's got to be. It's also got to, for us, it's got to be something that's going to be in the news for a couple of weeks. We had a funny ad that wasn't, that never made it up because it said, "Smile, Herman Cain thinks you're pretty." Remember the time when Herman Cain, every other day, a woman was saying, "Oh yeah, he pinched my butt and he made a pass at me." And by the time we were going to get the ad up, he had dropped out of the race. So it was so it's got to sort of have some staying power because we pay a lot of money to get our billboards up, and they at least. So, but there is nothing that I would say.
you could have tweeted that one out.
Now we would do it on Facebook. That was actually, we weren't quite. So it's got to have some staying power, but I don't think that there's anything that I'd say. Usually religion and politics, but clearly, I don't know what else is what people get scared of.
Karen, do you have any thoughts on this?
No, just how much harder it is when you talk about advertising and when you have to advertise something like storage space, what you might have to do to get attention. And I think coming more from a nonprofit cultural institution, I don't think we share these type of problems as much. We're not selling a product. We actually are promoting, what we call intellectual cultural content. So,
Now you're doing something currently with phone kiosks, and you're working with the Droga 5 advertising agency on a project?
Yes, well, we have an exhibition up right now called New York City 1993, so it looks back at work that was made 20 years ago. And Droga 5 came up with this pretty unique campaign where they took over the 5,000 phone booths that exist, and if you call in a toll-free number, and the campaign's called Recall 1993, you will hear a voice of some notable from who will talk about his memory from 1993, and it's geotagged. So if you're in Chelsea, you'll hear a story about Chelsea. If you're in Upper West Side, you'll hear a story about Upper West Side.
And some of these stories are about like contentious social issues too, like the fight against AIDS and
yes.
some other things.
Right.
It's like you take some risks on this.
But it's easy for us because we're talking about New York City as a city and how it's influenced culture and politics and society. So it kind of all weaves in together. It feels almost, quite frankly, like an educational campaign. But I guess what I want to flip it back is we were very lucky. This is a pro bono campaign. They had 40-some people working on it. And I think they put a lot of time and effort into it. And I was really curious, that when they did this, how would this actually move the needle for us? And so that comes down to admissions. Did we get a lot more people? So we did some stats and data tracking. And for that 1 week when that campaign came out, we had got a big rise. But then we dropped right back to our regular attendance rate the following week. So we only spiked 1 week. So I want to flip it back to Archie just to say the social issue advertising moved the needle tremendously for you. Have you seen that, like, when you come out with a really fantastic ad and, you're getting all this great email or your friends saying that's the coolest shit I've ever seen, do you have the spike of a lot more people coming and running and getting storage space?
Okay, unfortunately, no. Storage is one of those things. There was, and Megan, put that one back. The storage is one of those things that, I'm sorry, the one with the guy, the things coming out of his head about, you only do storage when either you are so organized that you're like, I'm going to get storage, I'm going to get stuff out of my room, or when a life occurrence happens to you. So part of this is much more of a business, the business question is, how do you make someone say, man, I've needed storage for the last 12 years, but tomorrow I'm going to get my storage room. So that's what that ad was trying to say. It was like, it's a guy thinking of all these things and has put stuff in storage. So the thing is that, Karen, we basically have, we want to be there all the time.
So it's sustained.
Exactly.
Right.
So the minute when something does happen and then you're like, okay, Manhattan Mini Storage, I've been laughing at I've been smiling, and now I'm going to go for storage. But it is very hard to say, just because an ad was great, I'm going to go rent my storage room. I wish it would, but it's not.
John, there's somebody who's worked in the advertising industry. Could you talk a little bit about this whole move the needle, selling? Does it sell? Does it improve the perception of the company or the brand? And what is it that these sorts of ads do or don't do?
Sure. There are the easy ones, if you're working on a product that sells something, if you're working on cookies or diapers or, shoes, whatever it is, and you run an ad and you can track it. You can test it, and they do. And they see what works. It's never pure science because the nature of advertising is such that I think there's unknowns. For the big brands, and I've tended to work on more amorphous brands that sell ideas, right? Brand advertising for credit cards or banks or insurance companies or things like that, where you're trying to create an image, you're not selling a product. I think that's a much tougher thing. And it's a much longer-term game. Again, you test it, but I think in the world we've been living in the past several years, for big corporations, what you are looking for is much more amorphous. You're looking for people to not hate you.
So the idea is that by doing something that's going to get people's attention, that will somehow translate into warm and fuzzy feelings?
I don't think it's that. I don't think it's warm and fuzzy necessarily. I think what I think what a lot of ads in corporate America are trying to do is convince you that they are part of the solution. I think there was a time, I don't know when it was, 50, 75 years ago, where people believed in corporations and thought of them perhaps more, there was more of an inherent trust. I think that's eroded to a remarkable point in the United States. We don't perhaps trust banks, oil companies, big insurance companies, Wall Street. We don't believe that those men and women are out doing right by us. And that's a really interesting thing, because how do you as a corporation deal with that? How do you deal with that? And what is it you say to someone who, how do you create an ad that builds trust? I think that's what people are trying to do now. So,
And then trust comes from a company suggesting to people that they have a brain in their head and they are they are aware of what's going on. Or
I think it comes from a voice, right? I think it comes from by a voice, meaning how you are spoken to as a consumer. And I think the good ones come from truth and humility and understanding what people's lives are, right? I think the bad ones come from the hint of truth, truthiness, as Stephen Colbert says, a Disney-esque worldview, and a complete cluelessness as to what real people's lives are like.
Speaking of cluelessness, there have been several incidents in the last few weeks of giant companies that have run advertisements that they've had to abruptly withdraw and apologize for, and some of these ads have ranged from have really touched on some very touchy issues, if you will. There was a car ad that sort of was perceived to have made light of suicide, and that got pulled. Mountain Dew went through a couple of controversies recently with rap artists. In one case, because of the rap artist's lyrics. In another case, because of of an online video that the rap artist created for Mountain Dew. There was an example of Chevrolet having to withdraw an ad because of the lyrics. Some of the lyrics were borrowed from a song from the 1930s that had derogatory, stereotyped language about Chinese people, and on and on and on. And I'm wondering whether some of this stems from an effort to push the envelope, or an effort just to be hip or perceived, whatever some corporate guy thinks is hip, and what sort of pluses and minuses net out from something like this. Do people remember it? Are they glad that the company pulled the ad and apologized, or are they mad that the company did something like this to push the boundaries in the first place?
I can only guess. It sounds like bad judgment all around. I think, I don't think any sane ad agency or client is out there trying to offend people.
I also think they misjudge people and don't think that they're smart enough. Because the Mountain Dew ad, which was all over television this morning, I was watching it because I kind of I'm innately rooting for pushing the envelope because I'm doing that. But when I saw that ad, I was like, really? It wasn't that funny. It was offensive. I just don't think that they're shooting to be smart in whatever else they're trying to do, because it's just so maybe they're just misjudging the consumer by saying, oh, I don't know, let's be really, really goofy, and just not getting. That one just was puzzling. I mean, there's just nothing funny about it. But anyway.
And is there in a bizarro universe, is there a Manhattan Mini Storage that runs ads from a right-wing perspective and takes Staten Island Mini Storage or some sort of a Wyoming Mini Storage that run ads that make fun of Obama and are for pro-life and hooray for the 1%, and special discount for rich people this
Oh my
week
God.
only on storage rental.
I can't like even go there because it's like my brain doesn't. The only time Obama's the ad that's up there right now, it says Mitt Romney. That guy couldn't even beat Obama. There was a point in Obama's presidency where he really was like he was just losing popularity, and it was before the Republican nominee had been. They were all duking it out, and Obama just I don't know. He just like really wasn't at the top of his game. So we ran that ad and that's a little bit, that got confusing for some of our customers. Like, wait, I don't get it, Archie. Like what the heck? Like, what's going on? And I think that was a little bit personally. It was like, what is Obama doing? I mean, this should not have even been a race. And he looked like it's possible that
It could go either way.
it could go either way. Like,
Yeah,
what the
yeah,
hell,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, I remember
So
that.
that's when that one ran. But it is so hard to get into a place where we'd be putting things out that were blatantly pro-gun or things like that. I wouldn't do it in New York, but I wouldn't do it at all, personally. So it's too much about personality for me. But again, I'm very lucky to sort of be able to play in the.
You'd certainly be pushing the envelope in New York if you ran ads that were pro-gun
Can you
and
imagine?
pro-life
People would hate
and
us.
so on and so forth. Right, but then they would get to the point where you'd be hated.
Yeah.
Karen, can you talk a little bit about being in the public space as a nonprofit, and do you feel that the voice that you have ought to be different from that of a company, or is it all of these ads out there for companies like Manhattan Mini Storage and Kenneth Cole and some of these others that leads you to also want to try to do that in some way and have that kind of a public personality and voice in the marketplace, because you're selling people to come to your museum and to donate money. It's a lot more nobler than selling potato salad, but it's still
Very, very simple answer. It depends who you're funded by. And as a nonprofit institution, we're funded by many corporations, foundations, and the city. So that's the answer.
so it's steady as she goes.
Steady as she goes. We focus on the art. We think the art on some level should speak for itself. But we're very conscientious of what artworks we choose to put into our advertising campaigns, of course. So.
And John, earlier you were talking about how the Manhattan Mini Storage advertising reminds you of art, of certain provocative public artists who specialize in art that tries to raise people's consciousness on issues and so on and so forth.
Yeah, some of the work reminds me of Jenny Holzer. I don't know if you're familiar with Jenny Holzer's work.
Is that the one who, is that, I think, therefore I shop? Is that her? Or is that Barbara Kruger?
That's Barbara.
Barbara Kruger, I think. But and Ed Ruscha, his work that took, an image of a mountain scene, and the type on it was no payment till April. And it was interesting to me because it broke through a bit. It was art and commerce, and what did the words mean? And I think some of your work does that, where it's bigger than the category it's in. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a very hard thing to do, and you guys have done it well. But it's a very interesting thing to do because it brings up the issues, and people talk about it.
Right, and that's it. Do we have the Storagista? Did we end up bringing that? Okay, so here's. Around 2008, when everything, the economy was doing really badly, and we're like, we got to get back down to business. It's got to be about storage. So we tried that one, Storagista, and we tried Storage, and a couple of others were in this campaign, and it was just so. It wasn't horrible, but it really wasn't our good stuff. And we just, Cece and I just looked at each other like, we just can't do this anymore. That was pressure from our numbers going down, but the entire city was going down. We're like, okay, we have to talk about storage, and we just did this sort of really advertising, and it was it wasn't fun, and no one was putting it on their Facebook page, and it just was like, when you're not hitting it well. So we've really sort of tried to not go there again, not go for desperation and just talk about storage, but still try to have an edge to it.
Now, recently you had an ad that was sort of storage centric. talking about, it said something like, trying to raise a child in a Manhattan apartment is like trying to grow an oak tree in a thimble. And I guess the takeaway there to me was very sort of storage was up front in that ad. That ad was about storage more than it was about other things. But you said it was very interesting. You said that you got some very unusual reactions to that advertisement.
Yeah, I mean,
There it is, raising a baby in a New York City apartment. Yeah.
is like growing an oak tree. Like, people got annoyed. They're like, oh, that's anti-family, and you're saying that I shouldn't bring up my children in the city and stuff like that. Anything else out of it? I mean, that was just like, really? Like, that was just funny.
At least once a day we get a tweet from someone who says, I feel like you're questioning my life choices.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Like, it's so, people are so serious sometimes. I mean, they really are. It's like, oh my gosh, it was funny, but you can't necessarily account for everybody's getting our stuff. The Mets, too. Oh my goodness, that Mets billboard. I'm not a big sports fan, so I had we almost cut that one. Like, I was like, I don't think people are going to get, but we put it in there because that happened to be a great campaign with a lot of other funny things.
That's one of your most memorable ads,
my
and I
God.
say that as a long-suffering Mets fan. This
I
was the
had
one.
no-
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
Yeah, and I had no idea that was going to be so big, but it was. So it just goes to show, it's like, if you don't.
So did you get? Would you say that most of the Mets fans that reached out to you were aware of how frustrating it is to be a Mets fan, or were they really bitter and nasty and complaining?
They were mostly complaining about that one, right, Stacey?
Well,
yeah, they were angry.
When I knew I was going to do this, I went to your website, and there were some people who said, I'm
never
taking,
gonna start
no.
with you.
But there were fortunately plenty of people who said, it's just damn funny. And
Yeah, there's
I'm a Mets fan, and they are
Can you
terrible.
go back to the other one? I just wanted to comment when we were also talking about cultural institutions and the voice of the political message. We leave that up to the artist, but it's very interesting also how much advertising co-ops artists. So I just wanted to point out that there's a very famous artwork, a series that Gillian Waring did 20 years ago, where she had different individuals hold up a card, and she had asked them to write something about themselves that you might not be able to perceive. One of the more famous one was looks like a banker, but what it said was, "I'm desperate." And then subsequently, VW used a very similar, very successful ad campaign where people were holding up play cards, and I think they were more innocuous, like "I'm happy" or "I'm sad" or so. But it's interesting that also that you guys have also picked up on that trend.
There was I think W Magazine during the recession had a cover like that, where they had Linda Evangelista dressed up in her incredible finery on the cover, and she was holding up a sign like that,
Right.
and it said something like, it had some like really pointed message about the economy or the recession or something, and and so the co-opting goes on. I think it starts in advertising, like you said, but then it goes on throughout the rest of the media and the rest of our popular culture, where ideas and good ideas especially get borrowed. And well, there was that what's it, Underground, what's the Bob Dylan where he has the placards and he drops them, and
Yes.
Underground, Subterranean, Homesick Blues, and that's been used by multiple people for advertising and music videos and magazine layouts and all sorts of other things. So I guess the cross-pollination in something like that is certainly interesting, because it does show that if you do have, you can have an impact as an artist. But I don't know, are they happy? Are the artists happy when their ideas get borrowed by advertisers? Or?
I would think ultimately, I mean, if you take the long road of it, you would have to say that's fairly exciting, because usually contemporary artists think that their audience is, those who actually, come into that space. But in the case of Gillian Waring, I do think she tried to sue VW, but was unsuccessful. So.
I think on that note, we're going to open it up to questions now. So I'm going to switch glasses again. Oh, and I'm going to drop all my papers on the floor. And I think what we're going to do is ask people to come up to this microphone. Am I right? Yeah, if you could please come up to the mic so that we, oh, thank you so much, so that we can get your question in full stereophonic sound and glorious Technicolor. And we'd like to start with this young lady here.
In glorious Technicolor.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Sansara Taylor, and I think one of the things that I really appreciate about the Manhattan mini storage ads, besides the fact that they're one of the more interesting things on the subway, is it feels like an inside joke. Every single one of them feels like a New Yorker inside joke. Something about living in New York, the space, the crowdedness, but also with the politics, how scary it is outside of New York. And in particular, I wanted to talk about the coat hanger.
Okay,
The
that's
coat-
like my favorite ad.
It's,
the coat hanger.
It's my favorite ad that you guys did too. It's extremely dangerous what's happening across the country around abortion right now, if you leave New York or California, a few places. And I work with a group called Stop Patriarchy, and we're doing sort of like an inverted freedom ride, analogous to the freedom ride, where we're going from the coast into the heartland to places like North Dakota and Mississippi that only have one abortion clinic left this summer. And one of the things we want to do is big billboards where we end up, in North Dakota, in Mississippi, in these places where women are suffocated and their rights are being taken away. So one is I would love to hear your guys' thoughts, insights, input in that. And the other question I have more specifically is if you have any ideas, I would love to see an ad on the New York subways responding to the Bloomberg ads shaming teenage mothers. I don't know if you've been familiar with these, all the young babies who are crying.
This is a campaign from a city agency,
It's a
right?
city
And it's trying to
agency,
reduce
and their little
out of
babies
wedlock
crying
pregnancy.
and saying, "Mom, he's not going to stay with you anyhow. Don't you know because you had me when I was when you were a teenager, I'm like 5 times less likely to go to college or do this." They're ads that are consciously aimed at shaming young girls who have children out of wedlock, as opposed to making sex education more available, birth control more available, all of those sorts of things. It's a shame campaign, very consciously so. And so I would love, you guys are the ones who would do something about it.
We'll take the second one first. Is shame a valid motivator in advertising or public communication ever?
I don't think that shame really is. I think, well, first of all, for us, it would be too, not that we shy away from serious, but it's just, believe me, I have opinions that I'd like to, sort of say, shame on you for this. I don't know. I hate when
shaming him. I mean challenging the shame.
Yeah, I know, but you're saying you're saying how dare you put something that's shaming teenage girls, right?
Or something like so-and-so. Like my mother was a teenage mother. I'm not famous, but if there was a famous, accomplished person, like what's the big deal? Or maybe that's silly because a lot of, there are statistics that are true. But there's something, I'm not an ad person. This would be your brainstorming session. But something that would be playful and jesting. Anyway, you could think about it.
I'm Irish Catholic, so I can see guilting people. But the shame thing, I'm not familiar with the campaign. I haven't seen it.
You don't ride the subways much.
I just use a helicopter to get around the city.
Okay.
It's there.
No, I haven't seen it, which is weird because I ride the R train every day. But I can't imagine shaming is a good idea at all because I think advertising should inspire, right?
In regards to the abortion issue, a few years ago I spoke to someone who worked at Planned Parenthood, and she had kind of this, she really liked our work, and she wanted to talk about how they could make their stuff better. And at the time, that was before Emily's List. Planned Parenthood now has this thing called Emily's List, which is, I think, pretty hip. But I said to her, I was like, you guys you're just so boring. Like, their work was so dull, and Planned Parenthood I guess it was because they were nervous, instead of saying, like, this is just such bullshit. Like, a girl can't get an abortion in North Dakota, which is kind of what you need to say.
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, I think Planned Parenthood, I love the group. I love everything and they're doing better now, and that whole thing when the funding was being taken away and they got really tough and they got it back. And
Well, they get afraid to say the word.
They
If
get
you wanna put
afraid. You
abortion
can't- it's-
on demand without apology on a billboard.
right, like if your T-shirt would be
Yeah.
right. So it's just, I think they're nervous. I think people are nervous about talking about stuff like that.
My 2 cents, and it's barely worth that if you are going to North Dakota and Mississippi, is know your audience, right? It's one thing to write an ad here in Manhattan, and I think you want to. I don't know the audience. I don't know exactly what it is you want to say, but I think there's bludgeoning people over the head with a message, and I think there's subtler ways to say things as well. Because you don't want to turn off people or huge crowds either. I think you want to try to get people to think, right?
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Another question.
Hi, I hope I can read my questions or comments. I just asked the guy in front of me which of the two guys was Archie, because I came.
Archie,
I skipped a
Jughead.
dance class and everything for this.
Archie is the young lady at the
Really?
end. Yeah.
Okay, so I ride a bike in New York City. I have for 45 years or something, and I was riding my bike on Spring Street, and I saw the Rick Perry one, and it really blew my mind because I had never really seen Manhattan mini storages. I mean, I've been.
Which is the Rick Perry?
they
Did we
kind
have
of-
that? Oh. I haven't
They
seen
kind of blow my mind, but I had a kind of rough experience with Manhattan mini storage because I had 800 books that I wrote to store, and all this NYU students were storing on Van Dam Street, and I couldn't get a space or something. And then when I saw that Rick Perry ad, I thought, wow, who is behind this? I couldn't believe it. It was just great. I just
Did
so
you wind up
admire.
becoming a customer?
I will in the future.
So wait, you
Definitely.
have
I mean, I
you have
just-
800 books?
Well, I had. I sold a lot of them since 2008.
Wow.
But I did need, they were self-published, and I did need a space. And, you know, it was just funny because I was always dealing with the same guy on Van Dam Street. And I think I got a bigger space than I needed, but it was kind of funny because you had a lot of people storing. I didn't understand the Mitt Romney one, I have to say, when it came out. But now that you've explained it, I really, and also the one about The Onion. I just rented Barney's, what's it called, Barney's version. It's not a big movie, but, and you are supposed to keep onions in the freezer, according to him, you know, so that you won't cry. So I just thought that I'd pass that on. I think that's all for now, but, oh yeah, and what makes you think that Condoleezza Rice's politics have changed? You probably don't even remember what you said, but it
No,
was...
no. I don't necessarily think they changed. I just thought I don't. I think she would have been. I think she would have been fine for it. It's just we didn't. You know, there was enough feeling about don't do that. That might be offensive. You know what else was offensive? Interestingly enough, I met Gloria Steinem at this actually some women's rights thing, and I met her, and I was so proud of our advertising. And she's like, "Oh, I know your advertising," and the one about the Chihuahua, and I'm here like, "Oh, Gloria Steinem, it's so cool to meet you." And she goes, "I love your," she said, "I really think your work is great." She said, "But that one about your closet's so shallow, it makes Paris look deep." She's like, "I really think that's very anti-women." And I'm like, oh, I was so sad. She hurt my feelings. It's like, so I was like, oh my God, you know, in 100 years, I wouldn't have thought that. Like, she's like, no, that's not women sticking together and this and that. And I was like, oh goodness, forget it. Like, you can't please all of the people all the time, for sure.
Well, I kept coming, I'll stop, but I kept coming back on my bike to look at that ad because I couldn't believe it. And then I thought, oh good, all the people from Holland Tunnel are going to come in and they'll ride down Spring Street and they're going to... So I missed the first part. Is billboard advertising less expensive?
It's just that we own the billboards because they're on our buildings.
Oh, that's
That's
great.
the only reason we do it.
Go, go, go is all I say.
Thank you. We have another question.
Mine is a little simpler. It's actually related to the building space and the billboards. Seeing all these ads kind of run together reminded me that even though, you know, we kind of think of Manhattan as this sort of like cohesive entity, a little bit having these shared values and everything, there are, you know, still pockets of constituencies. And I felt like I saw that in the ads. You know, some were geared a little bit more toward single women, some more toward the gay community, some toward people that have maybe a bit more money. So I was wondering to what degree, if any, the company sort of tailors geographically, whether it's on buildings or on certain subway lines, you know, which ads appear where, and if you're trying to consciously sort of appeal to those different pockets.
Oh, interesting. Stace, we really don't. No.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
We know that too, yeah.
No, the only time when we're pushing an area is if we're opening up a location on the Upper East Side, and we will say, okay, in your area and new, but no, we will not sort of, we don't actually have it just doesn't work that way where our billboards are, things like that, so we don't go for specific area. If we were literally, I mean, phone kiosks aren't even for phones anymore. They're just up because of their kiosks. So, you probably would if you could, but we just don't do that much advertising that way where we're specifically targeting neighborhoods.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And that is one of the big hot trends in the advertising business right now. It's called geo-targeting, and because of tablets and smartphones and such, there are all these incredible ways that people can try to do that. Question here, yes.
I have to kind of start with a statement, and it's about, I must be so sensitive to advertising because there are a couple of ads that I feel are so despicable that I turn my eyes away when I see them. And I realize that we're sitting here today, and there's kind of a feeling that the receiver of advertising is one of us, quote, like a kind of nice, thoughtful person. But I wonder if that's really the truth, because one of the ads that I've been reading for years, so it must be successful, is the one that I see a lot in Departures and Vogue, and it says, "You never really own a," and it's the name of a watch, and I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Patek Philippe.
Patek, or,
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
don't
but
know.
I think it's that one.
Oh,
yeah.
it
it's
is.
so fucking despicable. There's a rich white man, and he's there with his boy, and he's...
His golden child,
and
his
he's-
golden
he's-
wasp
he's-
son.
he-
And it's always a son. It's
Oh.
never a daughter. I
it's
don't think I've ever seen one with
and
a
it
girl.
says volumes of bad things. But it's been going on for years, so I wonder maybe what ads you think are despicable or what you think about that, which is both an aspirational ad, but it's horrible, about what it says. So, and it means that there are people out there, though, who buy that ad, John. I mean, they read that and they don't...
I didn't do it.
Did you read that ad?
LL Bean. It's an LL Bean watch. I swear to God. I will die. It will die.
There's someone out there
You
who
never
I
really
own it.
own,
It was
you
60
never
bucks.
really own an LL Bean watch because you lose it in the woods at some point.
Because it's so embarrassing
There's
to
somebody
wear.
out there who thinks, wow, that's right. So anyway.
Thank you. How about thank you for that. Can we get a quick rundown from the panel? Despicable ads you love to hate or ads you hate to hate or anything that comes to mind in particular?
I never thought that about that Patek Philippe ad. I will now, though, because I never minded that. I am still mad at Exxon because of the Valdez. So whenever I see that, and even BP, like, we're cleaning it up and blah, 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 I'm like, those I find particularly, like, I don't know, just what they did was just, I mean, it was a disaster, and, like, we're cleaning it up and we're back and come back down.
Would you rather they not say anything at all and just clean it up? Or would you rather, does it, yeah, and that's the other issue. Are they cleaning it up?
It's just,
Yeah.
it was bigger than they're lightening it. So that's sort of what I find sort of.
Greenwashing. Yeah.
I dislike anything I write. I don't really like my writing style. It's funny, those ads, I think they're done by, is it Abbott Mead Vickers? I think it's a London agent. It's Legis Delaney in London that does it. And what I always notice about those Patek Philippe ads is the people are perfect. They're just perfect. So
It's called Photoshop.
yes, they are. So, what ads do you hate?
I mean, on some level, I think a lot of us are avoiding advertising because we're all streaming now on our computers to avoid ads. When I go to the New York Times online, I'm just, just trying to go directly to my article. I don't even flip through the...
Yeah, I
the
see
hard print.
vastly less stuff.
Yeah,
Because
I see vast...
we don't have a
yeah.
TV. We watch everything through Netflix and
But of course, on some level too, I'm fascinated by advertising. So I do watch the Super Bowl, so I can watch those ads. And I would have to say about 80% of them were despicable. But I keep remembering the one where it was the kind of nerdy, overweight guy being smooched by the
Oh, that was
buxom
Supermodel.
blonde.
Gross.
Yeah, that one was
GoDaddy.
gross.
That was a
I mean,
GoDaddy.
it was just like bad for everybody involved. So yeah, that's the one I remember.
Yeah, it is disappointing every year. I do several articles and blog posts and live blogging of the Super Bowl
I
advertising.
read those.
Oh, thank you. But the thing that really disappoints me is the idea that this is supposed to be the biggest day of the year for the advertising business as well as for football. And particularly lately, I think maybe something that the panelists have talked about, the fear factor. The advertising is just so bland and so middle of the road in most cases. It's they drag all of these archetypes and stereotypes and corny
Clint
old
Eastwood.
cliches out of the woodwork because they feel, oh, well, 150 million people are watching. We don't want to offend anybody. It's such a broad audience. We have to be as non-offensive and as liked as possible among this huge, disparate audience. So we're just going to be very nondescript and bland, and that's what you wind up with, a lot of tapioca pudding. And every so often there was like 2 or 3 ads every year that really stand out. But when you think that there's like 50 ads that run during the Super Bowl and people 3 weeks later can't tell you 49 of them, it's pretty depressing.
I just want to add one thing about that.
Having written a novel, I'll give you a plug. Your novel is about truth in advertising. It's about somebody writing a Super Bowl commercial.
That's right. They have an assignment to write a Super Bowl commercial for a diaper. I just want to say 2 things. One is I think it's very easy to crap on advertising. There are some very valid reasons to do it. I do think there are, and I'm inside of it and know a lot of people in it. I think there are very good men and women at agencies and at clients who are trying to do good work, honest work, smart work. And I say honest, and I mentioned that before because I think we live in a world where if you, as a client or agency, have the dare to do non-truthful work, you're going to be caught. We live in a world where you can't do that. They're going to find out, and it's going to tweet, and you're dead. So I think that's a really very healthy thing. Just for my brothers and sisters out there writing and trying to create ads, I do think there are some good people trying to do it. I think there's some not great stuff out there. As for the Super Bowl, it's become a cartoon. I don't think it's any more indicative of what advertising is than Mad Men.
But I think you have to ultimately realize, right? It's actually the clients, right? Because the great story is, I was working with some folks with Anomaly who do most of the Budweiser, and that was the most popular commercial, the Clydesdale, right? The trainer, the horse, the big love story, blah blah blah.
You mean the Warhorse ripoff commercial,
Yeah, exactly.
as I like to call it?
And then I asked them about it, and I said, oh, that was kind of corny, very Hallmark. And they said, you can't imagine how many amazing other pitches we had that got turned down by the client. And at the end of the day,
the ideas that are generated, and I've been in those meetings,
are
are unbelievable. Yeah. Every one of them great. But I think what clients are looking to do is something often that's cartoonish. Right? And a lot of it is pure entertainment. It has nothing to do with what they do the other 364 days out of the year. They want something memorable, ridiculous, a gerbil fired out of a cannon, right? It's a day where you drink beer and watch a game. So
I'd like to suggest, Archie, that next year perhaps maybe Manhattan Mini Storage try to do a Super Bowl commercial.
Yeah. That would take basically our entire budget for the year. One commercial.
Maybe you can go on Kickstarter.
Right, raise money for that.
I think we have up here what's going to be the last question.
No, we have time.
Okay. One more after that, yes.
So when you're running an ad, are you trying to direct it at the people who it's for? So if you're running a pro-Obama ad, are you running it at Mets fans or the people who like Obama?
So you mean are you aiming it at people who already like Obama to reinforce, or are you trying to aim it at people who haven't made up their minds yet to try to get them to vote for him? Is that the?
Or it's more like, are you running it at the people who like Obama, so they'll enjoy it, or the people who won't enjoy it because they don't like Obama and they're not going to like Obama?
Are you specifically asking about political ads, or are you asking in general?
Anything.
Okay, so I think storage is not, because storage, as I said, if people need it, they're probably, but if I was going to, if I wanted you to buy my sneakers instead of those sneakers, I would want you as my customer. I'm not just going for the people who are wearing Keds and saying, wear more Keds. I'm going for the people who are wearing Converse and Nike and saying, wear those. So I think it's all about market share. Okay, so I want my market share, I want Manhattan Mini Storage's market share, and then I want Tuck It Away's market share, and then I want Public Storage's market share. So I I am always trying to get everybody who would want storage to come to Manhattan Mini Storage. And then I want to convert people who don't even know that they want storage to come to Manhattan Mini Storage too. So it's really market share and just increasing that and getting more.
And then making fun of Romney.
Yeah.
I have to say that I understand from talking to people over the years, in the automotive advertising category, the people there say that a good deal of their advertising is aimed at reassuring the people who just bought the car that they made the right decision when they spent all that money to buy the car, as well as trying to get somebody who owns a different brand to switch brands.
Well,
So-
it's why you should never ask someone whether they like their car. It's like, yeah, I like it because I can't hate it. I
Yeah.
have to reaffirm my decision. It's a great car. It only breaks down
So it
every day.
becomes more subtle to get them to change brands then, yeah.
Yeah.
And the last question is the young lady behind you.
Well, thank you for a great discussion, by the way. I actually had a question. John, you mentioned about creating honest and good work, especially because we live in a world where consumers increasingly have more power because they have access to information. So that this big shift
good
in
point.
advertising and marketing. So in terms of when you are pushing messages, how much of it is you creating a message that you want people to listen, and how much of it is to listening to people and creating a message that will actually appeal to them? And also based on that, where do you see advertising going from here as consumers become more increasingly powerful?
That's a very good question, because the idea now that it's no longer a top-down yelling at people, it's a two-way conversation, and the
Sure.
consumer has the ability to talk back up at the advertiser. Yeah, does anybody
Sure.
want
Yeah,
to tackle that?
I'll throw in my 2 cents, but I think there's two kinds of ads we're talking about here. One is lighter, fun stuff, right? That's we were talking about the Progressive Insurance Company or Geico. I think both of those people do a great job of taking something that's inherently not all that interesting and making it really fun, right? So I think that's sort of an appetizer in terms of advertising. I think a lot of the advertising we see is these large corporations that have a lot of money and a lot of power and are trying to craft these messages. I think, and what I've seen is because corporations can't really hide anymore, because all of us have wonderfully access to information and subsequently power, that you're going to see ads that are more open, perhaps. And as far as changing things, the way I approach an ad is much more like journalism. My background is in journalism. That's what I got my degree in. That's what I want it to be. So when I get an assignment, I like to, you can think up a really clever idea, which I'm not good at, or you can do research and learn about the company and where they stand and what they stand for and speak to people. And I think the ivory tower thing is a thing of the past. I think you have to be on the street talking to people for a brand to be relevant to people. I really do. And I think that's where it's headed, and I think that's a very good thing.
Do you think brands actually are on board with that?
There would be pure speculation on my part. I do. I really do.
Okay. I think on that note, please let's thank our panelists, and thank you all for coming, and enjoy the rest of the conference.